All right, so good morning, everybody. My name is Aleta Jeffress. I'm the COO and CTO for NTT Data over their SLED division. So happy to be here today. I'm going to talk about the human side of AI, focusing more on the people than necessarily the technology. So definitely a conversational presentation today. So if you have questions as we go, feel free to interject, raise your hand, scream out, whatever type makes sense. But really focusing on, again, kind of the people, where do people need to stay involved in AI, and what does that look like, and what can you leverage from that? So I know when AI kind of started, which has been around longer than we even probably care to admit, right? There's been all kinds of automation and things happening for years, but this is kind of what I always, kind of envisioned. It was kind of this us versus them, kind of mentality around AI, and lots of different emotions came around, right, because of AI, and what was it going to do, and how was it going to impact, and there's lots of different things to consider, when you're looking at, when you're considering how you're going to start to lead through AI. But just a little bit about AI adoption, and I know there's lots of different statistics out there, but right now, AI investment is very high. So organizations spending about almost $2 million, right, on AI implementation. But a lot of that's not really going anywhere. So for a variety of reasons. But only about 11% of the CFOs really say, here's the ROI that we're getting from all of these AI initiatives. So they're starting, they're not finishing. They're starting, maybe they're creating more work than they're actually saving. A lot of those things are happening. 46% of AI is focused on boosting employee productivity, but this is not really alone what's going to drive value. So now you've enabled all your employees, they all have Copilot, they all have chat, whatever it is, and 3 hours later they're still playing around in Copilot or playing around in chat because they want to make it better, or maybe they go down a rabbit hole, right? So you still have to, with any tool, you still have to know how to use it and make sure that your employees can leverage it. And when you have AI implementation, there's also a lot of hidden costs. So AI still being relatively new. Even if you're purchasing a bunch of tools, there are multiple hidden costs when you're trying to do that. So, with any new tool that you implement, whether it's AI or something else, how many times does it end up as shelfware, right? Because you couldn't change it, your people hated it, they wouldn't use it, they walked away. I mean, there's all types of things that happen when you're trying to really do AI or any kind of implementation. So just a few thoughts around AI adoption at this point. It all changes quickly, as we know, but just some of those key stats. So today, as Doug mentioned, really going to talk about leadership around AI in two different topics. I want to talk about workforce and workforce transformation, and then business outcomes. So ensuring that the people, obviously workforce is people, but when you talk about people and workforce, what does that look like? As well as maybe what are some of the business outcomes where people should remain engaged. So a little bit more statistics here, but I want to talk about this just a little bit. So workforce transformation. A lot of the things that happen with workforce, 71% of CIOs say their people aren't really ready for AI. So it's not that maybe they're incapable or they can't do it, but it's a cultural thing, right? They're not ready. Like, what does that really look like? How am I going to change what I do every day? AI also won't replace jobs necessarily, but it might reshape them. So one of the statistics is by 2036, AI is expected to create over 500 million net new jobs. So think about that. So there's a lot of new jobs around AI, related to people, but you have to understand AI. You have to know how to use it. You have to know how to leverage it. I think one of the interesting quotes that Gartner has is they say by 2030 that 0% of IT work will be done without AI. So all IT work will have some component of AI. 25% of work will be AI all by itself. So AI will be running whatever it is that you set it up to do. And 70% of the work by humans will be augmented with AI. So it's going to come alongside you and be able to do some of the work. So what is new jobs? What do new skills? What do all those things look like, right? So it's really understanding AI literacy. There's a lot of things, lots of components, right? We've all seen, here's all the training for, decision-based AI. Here's like our augmentic AI. Here's all agentic AI. Here's all the things and the different types of automation and AI and things. But what do people really understand around that? I mean, having started a new role recently, I had to take a white belt in AI, and then I had to take a yellow belt in AI, right? And so, big companies are trying to roll this out, even so people can function at kind of this minimum level, right? But understanding AI, understanding prompt engineering, but also making sure what are the human skills that have to go into AI in order to make sure that it's really working well. So, you're still getting human feedback, based on what your AI results are. You have to make sure there's not bias in your data. That's a lot of human-centered information, but yet you still have to be technically proficient in what you're doing. And then also when you think about workforce, change management, change is hard for workforce. People hate change, that's just how we are. And so having to make sure that you have a plan and you're really considered, what's motivating your employees to change. Are they really becoming more proficient? Is it an opportunity for them? Ensuring that they have, maybe that's their next professional pathway, is to go down the AI path. So ensuring that all of those things are considered, and then talking really about how do you align upskilling to a business cause. So you can't come in and say, Elizabeth, you should learn AI because, the boss says so, right? How is that really going to tie to the business outcome? Why are you learning AI? What are we trying to achieve with AI? Why does that make us better? Tying the AI vision back to each of the employees and why they should be upskilling in these particular areas. So thinking about that. How many of you have implemented AI of any sort with any of your teams? All right, good. Okay, so on a scale of like 1 to 5, how'd it go? Pretty good. 4, 3, good. So to me, it's kind of interesting when I think about when I was looking at some of the statistics around workforce and AI. Have you seen the movie Hidden Figures? It's probably been a little bit, right? But to me, this was like very, very profound. I mean, if you recall, when NASA was getting the IBM mainframe computers, and they brought them into the hallway, and remember, they couldn't even get them in the door, right? Because the door wasn't big enough, and they didn't know. And I feel like sometimes that's what AI is. It's this huge thing, and it's sitting in the hallway, and we can't implement it because the door's too small. And we haven't quite figured that out. So then after we go in, we tear apart the whole door and the wall, and we break it all down. And then, okay, so now it's here. We can leverage it. It's sitting there, but people don't know what to do with it. And so, one of the quotes from Dorothy, as you see pictured there, right? They're all saying, we're never going to get that mainframe to work. It's never going to work, right? And so her response was, oh, it will run eventually. And when it does, we have to know how to program it, unless you'd rather be out of a job. And so I just thought that was a very applicable quote, because we're kind of at that same point, right? We've got AI in the door, it's operating, we need to learn what to do with it. We need to be proficient with it. Otherwise, potentially, yes, you might be out of a job. So, but let's talk about that too. So there's lots of AI. AI in management per se might not replace human bosses, although your boss might use AI to help scale, right? So we've all seen the AI tools that go through our email, summarize all our email, send us the summary, do this, don't do this, right? Because this is a waste of your time. So setting up those types of rules and those types of daily things can certainly help manage your time and manage your day. But I think as a leader, you have to really make sure that you're not setting things up so you're not interacting with your people. Don't let it replace that part of interacting with your people. So if time management's a challenge, still make sure you're carving out time or building that into how you're interacting and taking time for your staff. I also think AI can be really helpful in iterating, ideas. And sometimes people, when you have a team, they might not want to bring an idea to their boss, right? Because they're like, oh, how many times are they going to think about it? How many different things are they going to iterate through? Well, you can run it through AI, and maybe that'll give you a different perspective. So maybe you know your boss and know enough to think, well, they might ask this question, so I'm going to prep and I'm going to run it through AI asking me this question, and here's what a potential answer might be. So I think using that as a tool, and maybe even encouraging your people to use that as a tool to help vet their ideas, and think about that when they're trying to innovate or do different things. I think the emotional state of employees is also something to really think about with your teams and with AI. I was fortunate actually to hear a speaker talk a lot about this in the last week or two. And, 3 key takeaways I even took from that was that, AI can be pretty scary, just like that mainframe rolling in, at NASA, that, those people were fearful that they were going to lose their job. So that's really something to consider. Your people might be scared of this, especially depending on what level they're at and what they're trying to do. Then there's also anxiety around AI. So I have AI, I have Copilot, I have chat, but when can I use it? What can I put up there, right? So because then you get the guidelines. Well, you have it, but maybe you can't use it. You can't put this up in Copilot, and if you do, it's got to be the corporate instance, and all the things. So then people get wigged out and they don't know when to use it and when they can't use it. So ensuring that you're communicating with them, right? If they have questions, here's when you can use it, here's how, let's walk through that. Let's talk about that. What does that look like? And then I think another, key emotion is really the question, like, did this really work? What are the expected outcomes of this? Did it give me what I want? Is it really something that's helping me? Or is it hurting me? Just again, making sure that it's really getting the right result. So really keeping in mind, these are all of the personal and the emotional impacts that people are thinking about, on your teams, especially I think some of the less tenured individuals. So ensuring that you remain human with those people. So having a conversation, because still building teams really still requires trust. It still requires the basic things. You could have AI put a team together. That could be kind of interesting to see where that goes. But really being available, building that trust is what's going to create your culture of innovation and allow for those people to have different opportunities, and you can foster those opportunities, within your organizations. Another interesting stat just from Gartner, when we talk about the potential of having your job replaced by AI, is that Gartner's analysis of layoffs from January of 2025 to June of 2025 found that only 1% of headcount reductions are due to AI. And I was really shocked by that because, we've all seen all the posts all over, 20,000 people, 15,000 people, all these organizations, which to me means they're using that as a reason. They're using it as an excuse, right? Oh, AI is going to reduce all these jobs. And it might, if you've been looking for a job, that AI and HR is really pretty much a nightmare right now. But I think, again, they're using that really as a reason, and it's maybe not as statistically valid as we might think it is. So a few more things just along some of those same lines. Going back to thinking about implementation, 38% of CIOs say that the cost of AI exceeds the benefit, and only 36% of those CIOs are doing projects that are even breaking even. So again, here's a great conversation with your people. Maybe you're rolling something out, but is it really working? Is this really worth it? Do we need to tweak it? What does that really look like? 84% of CIOs and leaders lack a formal process to track AI accuracy. Of those that do, guess what? Comes back to the person. Still got to have a person come in here and really review the outcomes. What does that look like? Are they right? Again, factoring in bias and some things like that. And then only 15% of IT leaders who are in some stage of AI have agents that are focused on autonomous decision making. So again, what are we really using AI for? Are we streamlining a process? But who's making the decision, right? Are you really passing it off to AI? Are you having a person review the results and still make that decision? So be very intentional about that. And I think when you have conversations with staff, that might help alleviate some of that anxiety I mentioned, right? Because if you're running through all these things and they're like, oh my gosh, AI is going to recommend that I don't have a job tomorrow. Well, no, let's have a conversation about that. Here's how you can leverage AI to improve your productivity, improve your value to the company, all those types of things, rather than just assuming, AI is going to leave you in the ditch. That's probably not what's going to happen. So, all right. And I think this was another quote that I heard recently when you think about implementing AI is that how many of you have implemented an ERP system somewhere or been a part of that? So when you choose and implement an ERP system, right, you're kind of married to that vendor, right? You guys, you're married, you're going to stick around hopefully for a while, and that's a big process. When you're implementing AI, not only are you getting married to your solution potentially, you're having kids and you're moving to another country. And so that's what you have to think about when you're doing an enterprise AI solution. So just the magnitude of what you're doing is really pretty amazing. All right, so if we talk about people in business outcomes, lots of conversation, right, about how is AI really driving business? How are they making it better? AI can build capability, but you still have to consider the people are accountable. People are still accountable. You know, your board might come in and say, well, you didn't manage this. It's like people who decided that, or if they use their parking camera on their car or their backup camera on their car and they ran into a pole, well, the insurance is like, you were still driving, you know, you're still accountable for that activity. Strategy and prioritization. Again, people are still prioritizing what's important to the market. Can they use the data that they're getting? Absolutely. But really ensuring that they're aligning their AI efforts with here's the business value we're trying to create and what's our appetite for risk, right? Because that's going to be different for everybody as well. Again, AI can scale our decision-making process, but we're still responsible for the outcomes. And especially when you get into areas, you know, that are highly regulated, or you have things that are really trying to hold people accountable, right? Because they're not going to, like I say up here, they're not going to fire the model, or they're not going to challenge your algorithm. They don't care. That's not the point at this point. It's really, you know, the person is responsible for the business, where your data sits, who's accessing your data, what does that look like, right? That's all still going to come back to a person being responsible. And really thinking about who, not what, not yet, maybe, who is making the final decision when you're implementing AI. You know, again, are you using AI for decision-making reasons? Sometimes that might be appropriate, you know, on something pretty minor. Sometimes it's not. You know, I think one of the things I was talking with someone not too long ago, and they're like, well, we're going to use AI, we're going to create chatbots. I'm like, oh, great. You know, who likes to fight with chatbots? I do, you know. Oh, let's see how we can stir them up, right? So you need to make sure that you're looking for the right outcome and really driving, you know, what that final decision really looks like. So where must humans actually stay in this AI loop? And we're getting kind of more into, you know, some of the back end part of AI and what to think about from a people perspective. But, you know, here's all the data, right? What's going into your model? Is it the right data? Is it okay for that data to be in there? Do you have consent for that data? You know, it's sitting out there, there's retention issues, you know, really putting together your data governance model around your data and what that looks like. Policy and ethics, again, bias in your data, making sure that you're taking that out as much as you can, which means that you're defining the boundaries around your data. What does that look like? Making sure that it's acceptable use policies, things like that. We still rely on user experience. There are still entire lines of business around the human side, the human factor, user experience, because people still have to use it, hopefully. You know, so if they're using it, you need to be able to respond to them, back to the chatbot thing, right? So ensuring that you have the right interface, your outputs are good, your workflows are good, all of those things are tuned up. And then lastly, you have to have a person to manage your escalations and your expectations. Can you know, we all know that probably when you call a customer service line nowadays, your first round, even if it's a voice, your first round's probably some kind of AI generated something. Right? But if you really have an issue or you're trying to get to a certain point, then you're going to make sure that you're raising it up. How do I get to a real person? You know, how many times do you say that when you're calling the bank or your mortgage company, right? You know, real person, customer service. So making sure that that you have a way for that really to happen and give an out for that. So A little bit more just about kind of making sure that you know your humans are in the loop. And I think that, again, making sure that humans are verifying some of your outputs before they're executing on them. This is part of your creation of all of this, and ensuring that you're following the right methodology, putting all of this together, ensuring that you have exception handling, again, making sure that you're getting the right subject matter experts. It's got to come back to people, especially if they're high risk or things that are very impactful to your business. Engage people in active learning. You know, we still have user groups. We still have, when we develop things, you're putting people in a room and running them through, you know, your interface, so to speak. So using that human feedback to really improve your models. And then, you know, we have what we call this guardrail generation, right? Where we're making sure that our output has built-in safety, you know, it's ethical, quality constraints. Again, there's lots of conversation out there about that, but making sure that we're using all of that and leveraging all that to make sure that what you're doing on a daily basis really is applicable. So, you know, one example of that is, again, talking about chatbots. There was a healthcare chatbot, for example, that refuses to diagnose a patient, but certainly would make sure that, where did I go here? But certainly would make sure that it can offer general information. You know, the worst thing nowadays is something goes wrong and immediately you go to chat. Oh, here's my list of symptoms. You know what's happening. Well, might not tell you exactly, you know, what the problem is, but might give you some general recommendations. So ensuring those types of examples are out there. And then, you know, when you think about how are you going to put some of this together, how are you really going to implement this, ensuring that you have some of the right accountability things set up. You know, these are some of the tactics that people have used for a long time. These aren't really anything new to technology, right? But revisiting them and ensuring that you're using them for AI, making sure you have a RACI chart, right? Who is going to really be responsible, accountable, consultative, and informed for all of your AI work. Ensuring that you have AI product owners. Again, we talked about all these net new jobs. There's going to be new roles around how to really leverage AI, whether that's engineering, data, security, SMEs, you know, all the things. They'll all need to be accounted for. And evaluating your risk. How much risk are you willing to take on, and when do you need to make sure that people are plugged into that? Low risk things, you can probably get away with AI making a decision, right? And you have some kind of audit process to go back and look at that. But as you get into medium risk or high risk, then you're going to leverage people, again, more and more, at least at this point. And ensuring that you just have a model, you know, set up that really supports that. So making sure that you know, here's what decisions are made with AI, and making sure here's what decisions are made with humans, and following up on that. So, all right, how am I doing, Doug? Okay, so a couple of things, there's always the risk of over-automating, over-AIing, if that's a verb. You know, we've seen some of this, like when you create a picture sometimes and you get people like with 6 fingers and, you know, things like that happen pretty frequently in AI. But, you know, your data, it can come back and it can say, you know, it can be hallucinating data, it can make false correlations. It might think of 2 different things to correlate that really aren't right. Again, your over-automating can have bias, can have discrimination in your data point. If you're just leveraging that and using it and putting it out, well, then you might have a reputation issue if you put out the wrong thing. We've heard a lot about that, especially in law, right? People will rely on chat for old law cases and things like that, and not really accurate. Ensuring that, you know, where your data comes from, you don't have data leakage, your IP exposure, privacy violations. Again, when your people are using AI, where are they putting it? Where's the data coming from? Are they putting it back out in the universe? You might not want that. Making sure that you have guardrails set up around that. Really looking at non-compliance and litigation. Again, you make a bad decision, the compliance people or the regulatory people kind of come after you. So now you're stuck in a situation where you're litigating or having to defend yourself against something that was automated. Just creates a lot of operational challenges, right? So ensuring that you're continuing to use people to manage that wherever you can. I thought this was kind of an interesting example of correlation, so that's a little bit small. But spurious correlations. So I ran a sample, and you had ice cream sales were correlated to drowning. I'm like, well, that's pretty disparate. How does that happen? Well, ice cream sales and drownings, although they might appear to be correlated in this AI example, but the real driver is temperature, right? So people buy more ice cream in the summer because it's warmer and it's nice out, right? And then maybe they're not good swimmers, or they go in the river, or whatever happens, and so, which is also a byproduct of warmer temperatures, being outside, being more at risk. So again, just correlations that aren't really accurate. They might be distantly related, but not really accurate. So you don't want this to happen to your data and impact your business in a negative way as well. Okay, and lastly, measuring what matters. AI is still, and technology, right, is still all about making sure that there's, a high degree of accuracy and metrics in what you're doing. So depending on your industry, manufacturing, or really any industry at this point, just here's what's accurate, here's what's factual. If you have OSHA problems, then safety incidents, things like that. Really making sure that you're measuring your process. So you've implemented AI. How does that impact, really just what you're working on? What does that look like from being able to cycle, or how many times do humans have to intervene? Ensuring that your outcomes are where they want you to be. There's a lot of talk right now, and boards and bosses and people are like, thou shalt implement AI. Well, why? What's driving the business outcome around that? So if it's customer satisfaction, then leveraging how that's going to work. So however you track customer sat, and are you decreasing expenses? Are you increasing revenue? What are the things that's really driving all of that? And then lastly, ultimately you're always measuring risk. So is AI really helping you reduce your risk? Hopefully that's the case. You also want to have better compliance, things like that. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time today. Feel free to link in with me. There's my link below. Thank you.